In the 10 years that I've worked as a clinical nutritionist, I have seen one person come into my clinic out of hundreds who is actually eating enough protein. I'm Mandy, I'm a registered clinical nutritionist, and I work with the Body Reset program. And having worked with a lot of clients now, I can tell you that if you changed one thing in the way that you eat, if you simply ate more protein, you would have better energy, you would be able to lose weight easier, you would be able to sleep better, and a whole lot of health factors would change for you really, really quickly. I think that protein is an under-focused on nutrient, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is related to some fear around the fact that maybe we eat too much protein and maybe it's not a good thing for our kidneys and maybe it's not a good thing for our health on the whole. I did a whole video on this, which I'll link below this, kind of breaking it down and showing the science that proves that protein is absolutely an essential nutrient for us. But before we get into how we actually get enough protein in our day and what that might look like, I want to share with you a review paper that was written by the top researchers in the field of protein, science, and health and longevity, Dr. Stu Phillips and Dr. Donald Layman. It was published in July 2020 in the journal which is called Advances in Nutrition, and they detail there how the recommended daily intake for protein, which is 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight, is based on just being enough to meet the minimum requirements for 97% of healthy adults. So the RDA, or the amount of protein that we're recommended to eat, is just enough to not create a deficiency. It's not enough to really optimize health. It's not enough to really promote good muscle maintenance, good blood sugar balance, and good weight management. It's just enough to remain not deficient in a healthy adult. And they really highlighted the fact that this is referring to healthy adults and not people who are working on or trying to improve various chronic diseases that we might be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Things like high blood pressure, things like high blood sugar, things like obesity, things like digestive issues or muscle mass loss or bone degeneration, all of these things which are really important for us to manage as we age. The RDA for protein is not adequate for dealing with those things. They also go on to say how there's been multiple studies that have shown that that amount of protein is inadequate for aging adults, and they also summarize at the end the point that as much as the total amount of protein that you consume is important, the amount of protein you get kind of in single meals may be the factor that's really, really important to nail, because it's getting our body past a certain level which allows our body to adapt from the signals from those amino acids that we get in. Another thing I want to draw your attention to before we get into the actual amount of protein is the International Society of Sports and the National Academy of Sports Nutrition both recommend a protein intake that is at a minimum 1.4 grams per kilo of body weight and up to and over 2.5 grams per kilo of body weight. So the RDA is 0.8. Most places that are looking at health, sports, nutrition, weight loss, all of these sorts of things are recommending nearly more than double that amount. And at Body Reset, we use and have used for a long time really successfully that midline amount of 2 grams per kilo of body weight. And I really reassure people that this is not a high protein intake. There is evidence that much, much higher than this is safe and effective, but maybe we don't need to go to that level. It can be quite hard to eat that much protein. So we use 2 grams per kilo of body weight. And what I want to do today is I really want to take some time to actually break down what that looks like, because I think one of the biggest reasons why people don't eat as much protein as they maybe need to optimize their health is not because they don't want to, it's because we don't necessarily understand how we get that in our day. We don't necessarily know what foods are providing protein, how much we're even getting in any given amount, and how to even map out what that might look like. So what I want to do first is I want you to take your body weight in kilos and then multiply that by 2, and that's your baseline protein amount, 2 grams per kilo of body weight. So for an average sort of size individual, say 70 or 80 kilos, we're looking at between 140 to 160 grams of protein per day. Now when I say 140 to 160 grams of protein per day, that's not 140 to 160 grams of meat. So meat, whether it's a beef steak, whether it's a chicken breast, etc., has protein in it, but it also has a whole lot of vitamins and minerals. It has a whole lot of fat. It has some other things in it as well, which make up some of the bulk. So when I say 140 grams or 160 grams per day, that's 160 grams of actual protein. So then we need to take that a layer deeper and think, well, where is our protein coming from? And actually learn which foods are providing those. So let's take that amount. Let's work with 160 grams in this example just to keep it nice and clear and simple. You take your amount of protein and I want you to divide it across the day in 3 to 4 meals depending on how often you eat. And there's a reason for this, and that is that the amount of protein we get in a day is kind of like the top tier in a way of what's important. It's important that we meet our protein needs for our body. Our body doesn't really store protein just available for use. We need to supply it at the time, and it needs to be coming in sort of a constant supply. So there's the amount of protein that we get in a day, but there is an important element which Dr. Stu Phillips and Dr. Donald Layman have touched on, in that the amount you're having at any given time is really important. So if we simply drip feed protein in very small amounts across the day, we don't necessarily get the same effect as if we have it divided across 3 to 4 meals in sort of a bigger chunk of protein at any given time. So the amount that they suggest is at least 30 grams per meal, which is very easy to do if you're aiming for 160 across the day total. So divide your total protein intake across your meals, right? And now we're going to look at how do we get that amount of protein into those meals. So I want to break this down for you a little bit first, and I want to give you a couple of tools that I give our clients when it comes to adapting to eating a higher protein intake, because this is usually the biggest shift people have. When we talk to them about nutrition changes and whatnot, it's not that we're taking a whole lot of their foods away, it's not that we're telling them to eat a whole lot less. The biggest change they notice, and the ones they feel the best from, is that they're eating a lot more protein in different forms and different sources. So it's probably going to be the change that takes the most adapting to, but it's also the one that you're going to get the best results from. So one thing I say to people is always ask yourself the question, where's my protein coming from? At every single meal, when you approach the meal and you're thinking about what to eat, whether you're in town and you're ordering out, or whether you're at home and you're planning what you're going to eat, ask yourself the question, where is my protein coming from in this meal? And then make it a habit of planning your meals around the protein amount. So you're going to put a whole lot of vegetables with it, you might put some carbohydrates with it, you might add some seasoning, some herbs, some salt, some pepper, maybe even some sauces, but it's going to be based on the protein amount. And what this does in a way is it allows you to focus on what you are having rather than what you're not having. So for me, for an example here, I don't plan many meals that are pasta based. For the reason for this is that they're often not particularly high in protein, they're a very high carbohydrate meal, and they don't necessarily have a whole lot of vegetables in. So rather than thinking I'm going to have some sort of pasta, I'll think of what's my protein going to be, and then maybe I choose to put a serving of pasta with it, not the other way around. And so it just allows you this kind of nice framework to think through when you're planning your meals, when you're doing your meal prepping, when you're doing your grocery shopping, all those sorts of things. Ask yourself, where's my protein coming from? And then plan the rest of your meal around that. So that's just a little tool that I use. I give that to clients. We talk that through a lot. But let's go into some examples here of what getting around about 30 grams of protein per meal might look like in any given day. I get asked this quite a lot. What do you eat in a day? And I don't really like doing what you eat in a day videos, because what I eat is not necessarily going to be what you need to be healthy and energetic as well. There's big differences there to do with activity levels, to do with body size, to do with goals, whether it's performance or weight loss. But I do think it is interesting to give perspective on just the amount of protein I eat. And it's not like I sit down and eat half a cow at every meal, but I do eat a lot more protein, and our clients do, than perhaps what you may have typically eaten. So let's break this down across the day. Let's start with breakfast, a really good high protein breakfast. And this one's the meal that I think is probably the biggest shift for people, because a lot of our breakfast meals throughout, the last number of years of Western history are very cereal based, very grain based. So we're thinking things like toast, things like porridge, things like breakfast cereals, these sorts of things. So it can be a bit of a shift to get some higher protein into that meal. But let's start with eggs. That's a pretty common one. A couple of eggs. And a lot of people will say like, oh yeah, I have a couple of eggs on toast. An egg only has, if it's a really good size egg, only has about 7 grams of protein. So if you're aiming to get 30 grams of protein in that breakfast meal, you really need to be eating at minimum 4 large eggs, which is quite a lot. I don't know about you, but eggs sit pretty heavy. They are one of the slower digesting proteins, so they can feel quite filling, and they do come with actually a reasonable amount of fat in them as well, because obviously that egg content is made up of not just protein, but vitamins, minerals, and some fat. So what I generally recommend if you're having eggs for breakfast is especially if you can't tolerate more than say 3 or 4, have 2 to 3 eggs, and then put some lean protein with it. That could be maybe some fish, or maybe some chicken breast, or some sardines, or something like that with it. Maybe some cottage cheese if you're having dairy, something like that, to add some extra protein to it, to bump it up to around about that 30 grams. So 3 eggs, 50 grams of chicken breast would get you to around about that 30 grams of protein. Another way to go, if you're feeling like you don't want something savory, would be to have a protein smoothie smoothie or a protein yogurt bowl, mixing your protein powder into some unsweetened yogurt and then putting some nuts and seeds and some berries with it is a really brilliant breakfast that a lot of our clients use. And the goal here is look at your protein powder and see how much protein is actually per serve, because a lot of protein powders are around about 20 grams per serve. And so to get 30 grams, you're going to probably need to do a serving and a half. You will get some protein from your yogurt if you're having a unsweetened Greek yogurt, but bear in mind, like coconut yogurt, very, very little protein in it. And actually yogurt in general is not a high protein food if you actually look at the macro spread. So 100 grams of Greek yogurt only has about 6 to 7 or maybe a little bit more protein. Some of the high protein yogurts do have a slightly higher amount because they've been strained and maybe some protein added to them, but check your protein amount and check your protein powder amount to make sure you are getting enough. And then another option here that I like to talk about is don't limit yourself to foods that we traditionally think of as breakfast foods. A lot of people say they get bored, with eggs or protein powder, which I find odd because we've eaten toast for the last 20 years and not got bored of that, but suddenly when we change to eggs, we get bored. So anyway, there's that. But don't limit yourself to traditional breakfast foods. The goal is to feed your body what it needs to have optimal health. And if that means eating a steak for breakfast, then go for gold. Steak and a salad is a perfectly reasonable breakfast to eat if it helps you hit your protein target. There is nothing wrong with eating meat and vegetables 3-4 times a day. So we have a recipe which is pesto breakfast mince, and a lot of our clients really, really love this one. And it's a quick, easy, it's as quick to cook as some eggs, but that's a really popular one as well. Put some salad greens with it, cooks quickly. You could make it in advance if you wanted to. But yeah, what I wanted you to take away from this point is don't limit yourself what you eat based on what are typically breakfast foods, because it's just food at the end of the day. And if you want to live well, you want to live healthily, eat whatever. It doesn't matter. Cool, so that's some examples for breakfast. What about lunch? Lunch, typically, I'm going to say eat meat and vegetables. It's really easy. You can do it with leftovers. You go to the supermarket and get some shredded chicken and a bag of coleslaw and you are sorted. It doesn't need to be that complicated. So just making your meals, in a way, lunch is a brilliant opportunity to lean into boring. Lean into boring, lean into effective. It doesn't mean that you need to be bored by your lunch. You can still make it delicious, put plenty of seasoning on it, put some lemon juice, put some balsamic vinegar. Make it tasty, but you don't need to be making it so fancy that I didn't have time to make my fancy lunch today, so I went and got a Subway roll instead, which is going to have poor quality protein, very, very low dose with a whole lot of carbohydrates wrapped around it. Take the time, it doesn't take that long to make yourself a decent meal, whether it's some leftovers, whether it's a salad and some chicken or something like that, or some tinned fish. And my thing here would be with your tinned fish, a lot of people use the little 95 gram tins of tuna or salmon, which are brilliant. They're so portable, they can stay in a hot car, they're not going to go bad, but you need 2. 95 grams is not enough. Have a read of the label on the back. It's not enough. I thought about 15 grams of protein, so you need 2 to really hit that 30 gram amount, or you need to put some boiled eggs with it, or you need to put something else with it. So the thing with lunch is lean into the boring, make it easy, make it doable, just make it something you can do every day and just not fail on. And the benefit of that is you'll just have so much better energy in the afternoon. You'll be fueled up. And one thing that we really see happen with our clients is once we get this breakfast and lunch protein anchored, because often those are the 2 meals that people are not eating high protein. So when you lock in a good protein amount at those 2 meals, the snacking and the out of control appetite and the hunger and the overeating later in the day just disappears, because we're fueling well initially and we're meeting that protein need. A lot of our drive and our hunger is actually driven by our body's need for protein, and we will stay hungry until that need is met. So meet the need early, and that can really help to curb the cravings and the overeating that can happen later in the day, which can sabotage your results. You might have had really great willpower and been really good all day, but if it gets sabotaged by under eating and then later on you're eating too much, then obviously that process is not working. So breakfast, gave you some options there. There's the eggs, making sure you're getting enough of those. There's protein powder, making sure you're adding enough of that, or just throwing out the breakfast foods altogether and having a steak and salad or having some meat and vegetables. With your lunch, lean into boring, lean into something you can do easily and just not fail on. And then we've got afternoon tea or your third meal option. This is one that can can be quite new for people. Often it's a snack grabbed on the run, it's skipped entirely, then you get too hungry and you eat too much at dinner time. This is a really great opportunity if you haven't put it in earlier in the day to use something convenient, use a protein powder, have a couple of Brazil nuts with it, have a small piece of fruit or some carrot sticks or something like that. Just shake it up, drink it and go, and you've hit your protein amount without too much extra effort. A couple of other things that I love here, if you are using your protein powder in the morning, and we don't want to be using protein powder for too many meals of the day, because even though it is hitting your protein target, it doesn't come with a whole lot of other nutrients that whole foods come with. So if you eat a steak, you get the protein, but you get all that B12, zinc, selenium, etc. as well, and the essential fatty acids. If you have protein powder, you get your protein amount, but there's not too much else that you get from it. So really just keeping your protein powder to one time a day to help you meet your needs. If you are using it in the morning, maybe having some tinned fish as an afternoon snack is a really good idea, or some boiled eggs, or even some biltong is a really nice thing to add in there. It's portable, it's convenient, and you can just kind of have it if you are taking kids to sport or if you're going into meetings or various things like that. It can be a really great way to add some protein in without too much fluff and without too much prep work. And then dinner. Dinner across Australia and New Zealand typically is a pretty standard meal of meat and vegetables and a carbohydrate source. And this is the meal that I focus less on for people. It's the meal that's harder to manage because there's usually family involved, there's usually time constraints, there's lots of opinions about it. And on the whole, it's probably the best meal that we typically eat in our days anyway. There's usually a protein portion there, there's usually some vegetables. And so all I'd say with dinner is just use that advice that I gave early on of base it around protein. Where is your protein coming from? Instead of having meals like pizza or pasta or risottos or these sorts of carbohydrate based meals, keep your meal based on your protein. Where's your protein coming from? Add some vegetables to it and then add a portion of carbs to that. And if you structure it that way, it doesn't feel restrictive. It feels like, okay, I've just got the balance right. So dinner is usually the meal that I spend less time on because a lot of people eat this really well anyway. One thing I would say from it is cook more than you need and take it for lunch tomorrow. Skip the carbohydrate portion, just bulk up your vegetables, and you've got 2 meals sorted for the price of one, and it's really easy and you don't need to think about it too much. So my main takeaways from this are the amount of protein we need is a lot higher than what we think. It's really, really safe to eat more protein. It's really, really effective, and we can feel a whole lot better for it. If you want to understand the science behind, is protein safe to eat more of? Why have we been told not to eat too much of it? That video will be linked below this one, so you can get into that. And then using that 2 grams per kilo of body weight as your guide to work out what you need. If you have a lot of weight to lose, you might drop that down a little bit to halfway in between your current weight and your ideal weight, and use that, because if you have a lot of weight to lose, it can be so much protein, it can be really, really hard to hit initially. It won't hurt you, but it may be hard to eat that much. So just dropping that down if you do have a lot of weight to lose can be helpful. If you're quite lean and close to your ideal body weight, you want to go a little bit higher rather than going lower. So split that across your 3 to 4 meals a day, and then just ask the question, where's my protein coming from? And if you don't know how much protein is in foods, doing a little bit of tracking in something like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or something like that can tell you how much meat, or even just Google how much protein is in a rump steak. It will tell you how much protein, and then you've got a little bit of an idea of how to add that up and work that out across your day. But what I would say is that most people are not eating enough, and if you change nothing else but to eat more protein and get more protein into your day, you could significantly impact your health outcomes and your longevity through the course of your life. I mentioned our pesto breakfast mince recipe. It's part of our high protein breakfast giveaway that we have. So I'm going to link that below for you as well. It's just a collection of the high protein breakfast options that we use with our clients that they love, that I want to share with you to take away from today as well, to give you some ideas and just get you started. So enjoy that. Let me know what you think of the recipes, and I will see you next time. Have a great day, guys. Bye.